Barb Juliani, you were the daughter of a pastor, and you had prayed the sinner's prayer as a young child, but you got to 18 and you announced one day you weren't a Christian, and you left home. You became a prodigal that you had heard your father preach about for many years. How did you then become a Christian?
Well, I was gone from home for 7 years, and I left at the age of 18 telling my parents that I didn't believe in God, I wasn't a Christian, and I didn't want to live like a Christian. And all those things were absolutely true. And it was very devastating to my parents. And then I went on an odyssey of really attempting to find meaning and significance and joy, I would even say, in every way that I could. It was almost an Augustinian odyssey, from one thing to another, trying to fill that hole in my heart. So I left home and did what kids do when they're unsupervised in college, and experimented with drugs and alcohol and with different relationships. Moved in with a young man, eventually married him, then left him. Moved in with a drug dealer, eventually left him, and then had several other relationships. And in the end, I just began to feel sick of myself. I didn't want to become a Christian, but at the same time, I thought the way I was living was a little tacky. So I decided I could be a productive person, even though I didn't have to be a Christian like my parents. And at the same time, my parents were just reaching out to me in any way that they could, as was my whole family. They never gave up. They never gave up on having a relationship with me. They worked very hard at being in relationship with me, and I worked very hard to stay as far away as I could from them. So I went back to school. I had dropped out of school when I got married. So I went back to college and worked really hard in school and won a fellowship to Stanford. I met a man when I was working as a waitress. He was a bartender. His name was Angelo Juliani. And I moved in with him. So he was the third guy. And this was very disappointing to my parents because they had, they saw me, I was working, I was going to school, it looked like I was getting my life together. And then I think that their hopes just took a nosedive when they saw that he had moved in with me. But they went right on, moved right towards him. My father was writing this little booklet called the New Life booklet at the time, which was a way to share the gospel. So he would take Angelo out for breakfast and say, you're a man on the street, so how does this sound to you? Does this make sense to you? And I'm in the background going, Angelo, my father is just trying to share the gospel with you. But he thought it was fascinating. Angelo did. So then we were on our way to California, and my father, who was a pastor and who also had a work in Uganda, was on his way to Uganda. And he thought that he might die there. That was a real possibility. It was right after Idi Amin had been disposed. So he said to me, I don't want to take you to heaven with me just as a beautiful memory. And I became furious and yelled at him. My father was always self-controlled and never yelled, and I was the Miller that yelled. In any case, he said to me, I know you can't make yourself into a Christian. Can you just pray that God would reveal himself to you? And so I decided to pray that. And after I prayed that, I went to California. And the first answer to that prayer was that God revealed myself to me. And I began to see myself as a completely self-centered girl who only cared about myself. And that was the first time I actually thought that I had any sins. I had been taught all my life that Jesus died for my sins, but I didn't think of myself as a sinner, just as somebody who had made some bad choices and was trying to work my way out of them. And when I saw that I was really a sinner and needed to be saved, then every single little thing that I did just for me began to trouble my conscience. And that's when I really knew that I needed a Savior. And that's when Jesus' death on the cross made so much sense to me. And it was everywhere I went, I felt the presence of God. And one day I was walking through Stanford's campus, troubled over something very small, especially compared to all the other stuff I'd done in my life. And I just remember thinking, if Jesus really died on the cross, then you are forgiven. And I prayed that he would forgive me, and he did. And I stepped into a life as a child of God.